Hello, this video will review how to use Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms can be created by faculty and staff using their Office account. This can be used to make surveys as well as quizzes. This can then be shared to others to be able to edit and or see the results in cases of working as a collaborative team. You can also send the survey inside or outside of the organization so that others are required to log in to be able to complete the survey to give you tracking data, or you can have it to where they don't have to log in and the results are anonymous. The first step will be to log into Microsoft Forms via your Gordon email. You'd want to navigate to the Gordon State website, choose Gordon Email, and log in from the web. Once you've logged in from the web, you'll choose the waffle area in the top left corner and choose Microsoft Forms. If it isn't available here, you can choose All Apps and then search for Forms. This is one of the many applications that is available in your Microsoft Office license. Here you can see that I have quite a few surveys already created. In this case, I want to create a new one. So I'm going to choose New Form. A new form is basically a new survey. You can also create a quiz, which allows you to create quiz questions rather than survey questions and assign point values to it. It's basically a survey just with point values so that scores can be added. But at this point, we'll just create a new form and or a new survey. You would then want to give your survey a title as well as a description. Below, you can start to add different question types. Notice you have the multiple choice, the text box where the person just fills in and kind of writes in a text box an answer, a rating, a date range, as well as a Likert scale option for your question types. So let's start with just a standard multiple choice. So here we'll fill in the question. And actually, Forms will try to help you out by giving you different options for answer choices. And so here, tablet would very well be one that I would include, but then I might want to type in my own options and then I can, of course, add in other options here. Also have the ability to add in other option, which would allow them to type in a response. Down below, I have the options to make it required so that a person is not able to submit this survey unless they have answered this question. I also have the ability to allow for them to choose multiple selections, so they could choose tablet and phone. The nature of this question, I'm asking them mainly just for one, so I'm not going to choose that in particular on this question. You also have a couple more options here. You can shuffle the options to where each person gets one in a different order. That may be more appropriate for like a quiz, but for a survey, I think it's probably fine just to leave them in the same order. You can also change just to where they're more of a drop down when they're choosing the answer rather than listing them as different kind of options all down at the bottom. And again, that's mainly just a viewing preference. In this case, I've asked a similar question, but I've asked basically for more than one answer here. What devices do you have at home? They can check more than one correct. So in that case, I'm going to choose multiple answers. I do have the ability to choose how many options they can choose. So no limit, they could choose all 4, or I could say equal to only 2, meaning they could only choose up to 2 options. They couldn't choose 3 or 4. In this case, I've created just another one option survey question, but I've changed it to where it is a drop down so we can see the differences of what those look like. So at any time you can actually come up and choose preview, and that will allow you to see it the way the viewer or the responder would see it. So in this case, I can only choose one option, but I can put in other. Here I can choose multiples, and in this case it's the same as number 1, but it is in a drop down mode instead. Interestingly, you can also see what it looks like on a computer, as well as if somebody was answering on a mobile device, you'll be able to see what that would look like. The long answer is pretty standard. You would just choose text, and then this is often, give me more information, explain your narrative on X, Y, and Z. By default, it's going to give them a very short answer blank, so it is always probably a good idea to turn this on to long answer so that they do have a bigger box. So if they do want to type more, of course they can always type less and just have extra space. Another one similar to the multiple choice is the ranking. So in this case, you list it just as you would with a multiple choice, but what's going to happen is when the user is completing this question, they'll be able to choose them in a ranking order rather than just choosing one or two options. So if we were to preview this particular question, this is what it would look like for the user. They would be able to drag them into whatever order they would like to rank them. So lastly, let's do the Likert scale questions. In most cases, the question really probably isn't going to be a question in itself. It's going to be a statement, almost like instructions. Click the option that best fits how you feel about this statement. Below, you're going to list the statements, but then you're going to list how you want those options to be ranked. It might be, satisfied to dissatisfied. It might be on numbers 1 to 10. It might be satisfactory to unsatisfactory. You can really just change these, but these are going to be your rating levels. You start out with 5. If you want less, you can always delete 1, and then you can always also add more depending on how many that you're needing. So here are some options that you might use for ratings, but of course you can change these to be whatever fits the needs and whatever fits the context of the question. Now I'll add in my statements. So here's an example of what a completed Likert scale question might look like. So you would have your instructions at the top, you would have your statements that you want them to rank, and then you would have your ranking options up here at the top. And again, we can preview this really quickly just to see how it's going to look, and it looks kind of like your standard Likert scale type question. Before we send this out, we can actually do a little bit of theming on this. We can go to themes, and then we can choose different kind of preset backgrounds one may fit. Or I could just pick, a simple color if I want to keep it simple, or even one that's a little bit more cartoon-like. I can also come down here and choose my own by picking a specific color, or I can upload my own background image or theming by choosing upload here. Or I could potentially just search one to see if maybe there's a background that I might like that's already created. So I might choose one of those and add it. Now you do have to be careful because some of them don't align well or look really well, so you want to be careful with your theming. The next step is to get the link to send this out. So we'll choose this by doing collect responses, but there are several options that we can choose. So first of all, we want to decide how people are going to respond to this survey. So you can choose that anyone can respond, meaning anyone with the link. Only people in my organization can respond. Now this is going to prompt them to log on with their single sign-on credentials, their Gordon email username and password. If they don't have that, they're not going to be able to. Or you can say, I don't want anybody with the link to be able to answer it. Maybe I'm doing this to a particular committee or a particular handful of people that I would like to complete it. So in this case, I might choose a specific people, and then from here, I would actually add in their names or email addresses. Notice that if I begin to type their name, it's going to pull them in based upon their Microsoft Office license. So I can go ahead and add those people in. From there, you can also choose to copy the link, and then you can formulate your own email or put it in D2L or whatever you're going to do to collect that survey information. You can also shorten the URL. It just makes it potentially a little bit shorter. And then from here, using it with this method, you're going to create your own means of communicating that link outside of Microsoft Forms. Separate than that is kind of this second piece down here below. So this is kind of its own thing, and then this is kind of something separate, is how to send out this form within Microsoft Forms. So one way is through an email or through an invitation. The other is through a QR code, and then the other is through an embed code. And an embed code would be something you would use to put into a website. You could actually embed it into D2L like a widget like the announcements widget, something like that. The QR code is easy enough. You would just download it and then you could put it on a flyer. People would scan the flyer and then they would immediately go into this. However, if you're using a QR code, more than likely you're not going to have certain people responding in that case, because the flyer is probably going to go out to the mass public. So in that case, you want to make sure to either have it on anyone can respond because this QR code is going out to the public, or only people in my organization can respond because this is going to people, faculty, staff, or students who are going to have to log into their Gordon email but are going to be able to respond that way. So if I'm sending this out via Outlook, remember it's going to be coming from whatever I'm logged in as. So if I'm logged in as me, it's going to come from that. If I'm logged in as a department or something, it's going to come from that department. So make sure you're logged in and using the correct account to have it come from that email. So then you would type in who you want it to go to. It may be that you want it to go to a whole faculty listserv. It may be that you want it to go to a particular group of people. So just like you're sending an email outside of Forms, you can do it this way. And then you can fill out this information. This is standard stuff, but then you can go ahead and change this up if you want to. Since we get a lot of spam emails and there's always a concern of is this a legit email or not, sometimes this method might not be the best way because it does come across looking very generic. It doesn't have, your regular email information. It doesn't have your signature on it, that type of thing. So if you're concerned about people seeing it and making sure to do it because they think it is legit, you may want to copy the link here and then actually formulate your own email and put the link in so it looks more like it's coming from you. Just kind of a word to the wise on that one. So at this point you have a form up and running. However, there's a couple of things that you may want to make some changes to. So we'll choose the icon here and we'll choose settings. This will give you more information. We already kind of filled this out of who can fill out this form. We said earlier only people in this organization. It is set to record their name though, so in this case it's not really anonymous. I can uncheck this to where it does make them log in to complete it so that I know I just don't have random people completing it, but it doesn't record their name, so I'm not able to see who did it. So it does make it anonymous, but it does restrict it to certain people in the organization. I could limit it to 1% response per person. It's still not telling me who did it, but the system knows this person has done it, therefore it's not going to let them submit multiple cases. I can also come here and choose different options for responses. I can have it to where it's just automatically always accepting responses, or I could say, you know what, I'm going to accept responses up until this certain date. So it automatically closes itself off at this date, so you don't have to remember to come in there and close it or download the data immediately for fear of somebody coming in later there. If needed, you could set a time duration of how long they have to complete the survey once they open it. In most cases, I would imagine most people wouldn't do that. You can shuffle the questions if you want. And you can also add in a custom thank you message. By default, it's just going to say, thank you for submitting the survey when they hit submit. But you can give, if there's going to be further steps that they'll need, you can lay that out here. It might be that, thank you for filling this out. You will receive an email next week with further communication about this topic, or something related to that if there's going to be some type of follow-up needed. You can even customize what happens after they submit it by allowing receipt of responses after submission, which basically will send them an email saying, hey, you did submit it fully and congratulations on that. So it will send them something saying that they did actually submit it. You can also choose it to where it will send an email notification of each response. So it will email you or whomever this account is logged in as. It might be a departmental email or whatnot. It will send a notification there saying someone has submitted the response there. Again, you may or may not want that depending on how many people are going to be responding. You may just rather log in and actually look at the data and download it yourself. Another consideration is what happens if I want a group of people working on this. It might be that I'm part of a committee or a team. So in that case, I can come to the top, I can choose collaborate or duplicate. I can make this to where I'm going to share it to be able to collaborate. And in this case, they're going to be using a separate link to be able to log in and edit the survey. So again, this link is going to be very different, and you want to make sure to keep it different than the collecting responses link. This is collecting responses is people completing the survey. The collaborate is people working on and editing the survey with you. So in most cases, you're going to choose specific people in the organization to have the ability to edit it because they're your teammates. In most cases, you're not going to have it to where anyone in the organization can edit it, or anyone with a 365 license can edit it. So in most cases, you're going to make someone very specific will be able to, and then you'll be able to add in their emails. And even once you add them in, you can choose how they can access. So I'm still the owner. She can view and edit, but she can't delete it or anything like that because I still have top ownership over that. And then I can just copy this link to them. They'll log in, and then they'll see a very similar interface able to actually edit it. So one last thing before we send this off, and that is survey branching. You may not want anything to do with that. You may just have a simple survey and they just answer all the questions and submit it. Now, it may be that you have it to where certain people get certain questions only if they answer a certain way. So to keep people from getting a question and saying this doesn't really apply to me, I didn't answer in a certain way that would even need me to get this type of question. So for example, if everyone first gets the question, which devices do you have at home, and a person only marks a phone, then I ask them, what device are you most comfortable using? Should I even give them that question based upon how they answered this question? Here's another great example of that. Let's say we have everyone answer the question of what types of courses do you want to take. However, only if they answer in person or both online and in person would they need the question of please list when you're able to take in-person classes. If they choose they only want to take online classes, they would never really need this question. So this would be a good situation of using branching. So to start, you would click on the question that would require that branching, and then you could just choose add branching. And then it's going to give you a couple of more options here. So what types of courses do you want to take? If I choose online, I don't want them to get question 8. So what would happen afterwards? By default, it's going to go to the next question, which is number 8, but I don't really need that for them. So in this case, maybe they just end the form. So they answer online, and then they get the end of the form because they don't have another question. For these two, however, they would want to go to the next question, which is what it is by default, and that question happens to be this one. So this was an easy branching situation. If they answer online, it ends the form. If they answer in person or both, it sends them to the next question. Let's choose another question to see what options we have. So by default, when you answer number 1, it's going to let you go to the next question. However, I could say, well, number 2 really doesn't apply. So after you do number 1, you can jump to whichever question that I need you to go to. You're actually going to skip question 2 and go directly to question 3. You do have to be very careful with branching, though, to make sure that the person is not skipping a question that they need based upon that setup of the branching. So it is highly encouraged that once you create your branches to actually go in as yourself as a user and try the different options to make sure that the branching is taking you where you need to go based upon the questions and how you answer those questions. Now let's look at our data. So we would log back into our email and go to forms, and again you just do that from here on the side and choose forms, and then you would pick the form where you would like to see the data. And you'll be able to see the form as normal, but then you'll be able to choose responses over here on the side, and we see that 3 people have responded for that. So we see some interesting data here of the average time it took to complete the survey, so how long each person spent on it. And we see that it is still active, meaning that people can still submit to it. So here we can look at it just via the web, and it kind of gives us some nice graphs here. In some of these cases, you might want more data, especially if you're looking at things that have typed responses. So for each of these questions, you can choose more details, and it'll give you more information, especially if people have typed long responses. Now, since these were set to be anonymous and it wasn't collecting user information, it just tells us that. If it had been set to where someone had to log in to complete it, it would show the name of that person's Microsoft account. So more than likely, in this case, it would show their actual name. With the ranking, you see that it kind of highlights what was the first choice versus what was the last choice, starting with red and moving into blue. So you can see in this case, the laptop was more someone's last choice than their second choice. If you hover over them, it'll give you more information as well. With the Likert scale, you see more of a graph, and so here we can see if you hover over it, it'll give you the exact percentages. But just by looking at the colors, we can see in this case that they were generally split, but it might be in some cases you see a lot more blue, meaning more people disagreed than agreed in that case. You can also view the results by respondent, which is helpful, particularly if you do have data on who that person was and you want to see exactly what one person said. So to be able to choose view results and you see that you're looking at it by respondent, you would be able to see their name if that was collected, and then you see individually how long it took for that particular person to complete it, and you're able to see their specific answers, and then you could just move on to the next person and so on and so forth. There may be a case when you need to delete this response. In the case of someone submitting more than once, you can actually come here and delete it, or you can print just that one response. Also, you can open this in Excel and export this data. And this is an example of what it looks like. It's more individual what each person said, and then you're able to see that data. If you'd rather have it to where you're seeing the generalized data here versus individuals, you can come here and print this summary, and it will actually print what you see on the page with more of it looking at it holistically rather than individually. It may be that you want to share this data with others, and by doing so, you can actually come beside it, choose Share a Summary Link, and then anyone with this link can view the summary of responses. So you'd be able to copy that and send that to whomever, and they will be able to see this information. And here is an example of what that link looks like. And again, this is a great way to kind of share the information without having to print it out. And that is how you create a Microsoft form and view the data.